All right, we're good.
Hello. Good
Hi.
afternoon.
Good morning, afternoon, late evening. The sun's still out.
Happy Sunday. If you're watching this on a Sunday.
We haven't changed the banner yet, but we will. It'll change from Mondays at 8 to Sundays eventually.
Afternoon. To just Sundays.
Yeah. Let's see here. It's going to be a bit of a short episode. We have a lot of work. I have what? They can see my face. We have a lot of work to do today. And I have to write our upcoming campaign as well, and our current campaign.
And we're getting on to about it.
We haven't played in a month. It takes a long time.
Does it?
No.
See last episode for more on the DM stuff.
Honestly, I've been slacking on the writing. I could have been done already, probably.
But what we're going to talk about today is kind of something that, especially as a new person, I have no idea what the line is, what I'm supposed to do. It's where I tend to get a little more frazzled, is, that general, you get to whatever area is next, whether it's the clearing at the end of the day, or it's the first thing in the morning, or it's the dungeon space you're going into, or a camp, or whatever it is. And the DM says, all right, you've entered XYZ. What do you do next? And you're like, I don't. So I think that's a really good place, whether you're experienced or newer. I think it's equally terrifying.
Yeah, it's a good
Daunting.
perspective from both the DM and the players. The players need to know or would want to know the right questions to ask so they're not wasting time.
Yeah.
The DM needs to ask players questions that aren't leading them astray isn't the right word, because sometimes you kind of want to, not show them the exact path, but you also don't want to, just give everything away either. So yeah, the topic for today is asking the right questions. And I guess we'll probably do a lot of examples.
Yeah.
And we will also talk about
Who should be asking those questions?
who should be asking the questions, who gets the information from the questions.
How you give that information to the rest of your party.
Yeah.
Because that's an important. We'll get there. But you don't want to be that party that you start asking 1,000 questions to the point that when you're told that there's a sign, you're going, what's the sign made of? Wood? What kind of wood? Good wood.
Yeah. The wood that the sign is made of does not matter.
Until it does.
Until it does.
We totally haven't done that, though, to him repeatedly for fun. But I think, the first thing that happens, you walk into this clearing. I'm going to use clearing just because that's a great example. And he goes, what do you do? So
my job as the DM is to show them a very high level of what they see. You walk into a clearing. It's a grassy field. There's some trees on the side. Quick glance, that's what you see, like trees lining this grassy field. Players are probably going to go, well, what else is there?
Is that the right kind of question?
It's very general, but it can work because that generally sets up for a perception check.
Okay.
So what else is there? Well, roll a perception check to see if you can see anything within the tree line. I would prefer you be a little bit more specific. Is there, you can ask certain questions that don't require perception checks.
Oh, okay.
How tall is the grass? How thick is the tree line? Is it stormy? Is it raining? Is it a clear day? How far can we see?
Okay. Because and the reason you wouldn't need a perception check, logically, is that's pretty obvious. That's given information. You're looking at a thing, you can see how far can I see. You don't need an extra perception check for that. But a good reason to avoid the general questions, there's two things I can think of. One, because everybody in your party is going to want to start trying to roll, because that's a general question. I would have wanted to think of that too. Okay, sure. Everyone wants to know what they can see. So a good way to avoid that, because a DM is not usually going to let everybody at the table roll, is one, think about what it is that your character is proficient in. What would make sense to them? Let's say you're in a forest environment and your character has a background of living in a forest for most of their life, whether it was in some little town, tribe, hermit, whatever. Use that when you're asking the question. It could be something along the lines of, well, with my background of living in this environment, is there anything that I hear or smell that triggers me to think something's wrong? Mm-hmm. Right? Maybe it's, and then, if you roll high enough, there's no sound. That usually means there's a predator nearby.
And that also can trigger something that's not a perception check. So say you're a ranger and you have a history of living in nature and you're proficient in nature. Mm-hmm. Instead of me making you roll a perception check, I can make you roll a nature check because that makes sense for you. You're using a different skill to determine an outcome.
Yeah.
So if you're more specific, it gives the DM the ability to change the DC or the type of skill check that would be more in the player's favor. Sure. Yep.
And also, if you think about questions, what else do I see is very general. If you go and he's basically, depending on how high you roll, he's free to give you whatever information makes sense within that role and within the scope of the question that you asked. Whereas you could theoretically, you could go, do I notice any tracks on the ground? Does this look like people have recently passed through here? Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think of specific questions.
Yeah, those are good. I mean, the specifics really do help. So, if you are in that situation chasing someone or trying to find someone and you end up in that clearing, that would be the first thing you ask. Okay, so we're chasing this guy. Are there footprints? Is some of the grass matted down? Is there a trail of blood if if you hit him or something? Mm-hmm. And narrowing down the environment can really help.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to spend 20 minutes looking at the horizon line and it's not really going to help you. So take the environment, do a scan, see if there's anything big running at you, right? Have someone who's probably proficient make a perception check, just a general one. Look across the horizon. Well, it looks clear. I don't see anything big coming for us. And then have someone else going, okay, go. All right, we're tracking this guy down. Are there any footprints, any blood, matted grass? That way you can narrow the environment
And
down.
that's, I think, why that session, we've talked about it before, but the session 0 idea is such a good one because not everyone in your party needs to be proficient in perception. This is a really good opportunity for you to look at your party's composition and know we've got people who are really good in persuasion, in perception, insight, history, arcana, nature. You want all of those different categories for you to have representation because everyone's going to have a different angle, a different thing that they're going to be able to get out of an encounter or search, type of situation than if everybody kind of had the same skill set. Because if you're proficient in arcana, for example, this is when I haven't really played a character that's proficient in arcana, and I always kind of want to, because there are a lot of really good questions that you can ask. I mean, I know there's the detect magic cantrip, or is it a spell?
Detect magic is, I think it's a first level spell.
Which means using a spell slot.
Yeah.
But you can ask, do I sense any remnants of magic, left in the area? Is there any, if you see something, can the source of that wrong be magic? Do I get a sense of wrongness from anything in a magical sense from this area? Little things like that other people can't ask. Again, nature, are there any signs that tree branches have been damaged from someone running through or, whatever it is?
Are birds or small animals escaping the area because they've been spooked?
Yeah.
And of course, the more specific you are, the easier your roll is going to be because you're looking for specific things that the DM probably didn't think of. Or even if they did, if they were expecting that, they had in their mind, okay, the DC is going to be 15. If they ask specifically about the grass being laid down, or if they're asking specifically for footsteps, we're going to lower it to 13 or 12. I love specific questions, but don't go overboard with specificity.
What kind of wood is it? Good wood.
Yeah, the type of grass doesn't really matter. The length of the grass does.
Is something going to be hidden in it?
Yeah. Yeah. How tall is the grass? Well, it's about knee high. Okay, so I'm assuming the ogre that we're chasing won't be hidden in the grass.
But if you knew how high the grass was, you go, does any patch look kind of press down because that might be a footprint or directional or whatever it is.
Exactly.
So it's just, taking it kind of a step further beyond the obvious, I think, really thinking about what your character would probably notice. If you're a city boy running around in the forest, you're probably not going to be as useful asking the questions or making the rolls as people with a background in that kind of area. Again, I think that's where some of that session 0 stuff kind of comes into play, that you can really have a useful composition of adventurers together doing things. So that's, that's part of where that comes into play, especially through these encounters.
Yeah.
I don't know what you'd call that. It's not an encounter. That's combat, is it?
Well, it's both.
Okay.
You can have a social encounter and a combat
That's true.
encounter.
That's true.
I just opened up the DMG to page 252 because there's a section on chases. And I think that's kind of a good start point to trying to figure out what the right questions are.
Sure.
And some of these are escape factors, right? So imagine that depending on your environment, you'll ask different questions, obviously. The open field is an easy one, but what if you're in something like a mine or a quarry? That you may need to get a more detailed picture of in your head. So at that point you go, okay, we're in a quarry, we're in a mine. Is it a small mine shaft? Is it a big mine shaft? Does it open? Does it split into many tunnels? Is there lighting? Are there rocks on the ground? Is there water trickling through? There's a lot more that goes into a lot more detail in more environments. But once again, narrow it down, have someone make your general check, and then think about the situation that you're in. Can you just automatically rule out anything that doesn't matter or that you think doesn't matter? Generally, if it makes sense, the DM is not going to try and trick you with something that is just way out of the ordinary. The dwarf that you're chasing doesn't have an ability to turn into water and just go down the stream, right?
That'd be pretty cool. I mean, not for us chasing them, but just as an ability.
Or if you, I guess, if you knew a little bit more of the background of what you were chasing and you knew that they were a survivalist as well, what in your arsenal would you use to try and keep someone from tracking you?
Like running through a stream.
Yeah, to hide your footsteps or something like that. So there's, and I'll keep harping on it, the more specific you are, the easier your role is going to be. But don't waste your time.
I think that's a good thing I was about to ask. One of the biggest questions I always have when I'm in a new area asking questions with the party is, how do you know, the big thing is wherever you go, you want obviously the critical information that you need to have to continue. We're in Tomb of Annihilation and we don't know where we're supposed to go in this huge map. I mean, he's given us a few things that we can go explore, but we have no idea if that's actually connected to the end game or not. So it's kind of hit or miss all the way through. And so obviously, as you are doing these investigations, you do want to know the critical information. You want to make sure that you've pulled that out of whatever you're supposed to do. But how do you know when you've maxed out, there's nothing else there, move on? I mean, what is that a DM responsibility to kind of be like,
yeah,
there is nothing else you can get from this area? I mean, how does that sound or go?
So I don't like to say it because, it kind of takes you out of the immersion a little bit, but there are some points where the DM literally just has to say there is nothing else in this room.
Okay.
That it's a little too general because it's like, well, maybe if there was a brick or something. Here's the thing. If I had you go in a room and do an investigation check and you failed, and then you search through a bunch of stuff, you ask a bunch of specific questions, and then at the end, you're like, okay, we didn't find anything. Is there anything else in this room? I will tell you, no, there is nothing else in this room. Because you failed that check, there might have been something.
So what if there is a key piece of information that is literally necessary to continue, and the one person who does your investigation role, because again, not all 6 people can do it, fails? What can you do?
You always have to have a backup plan.
Like
have more than just one weak link. If there is a literal key, for instance, that you're looking for, and whoever is looking for it fails that investigation check and you move on, there are tools that a DM can use that allow them to progress without that key.
Okay.
If it's and it may just be on the fly. Hopefully the DM does actually think about it beforehand, but say the key is to dispel a specific door. The key goes in the lock, it dispels the locked door. You could find a scroll that does the same thing, or notes, like scribbling of incantations when you say this, you can unlock the door verbally.
Okay.
Those are things that you may have to do up on
You
the
mean
fly.
the DM?
The DM, yes, I do.
Okay.
So always have an out. Allow your characters to progress in some way, even if it is the long way.
Okay.
And that's kind of their punishment for failing
Sure.
the role. It may take an extra 2 or 3 rooms to get them where they need to go, and it may cost them time and possibly a combat encounter because they failed that role. But that role was the easy way.
Right. Sure. So as a player, I think one of the instincts, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, is, you go in, someone wants to investigate, and the DM goes, okay, well, either 2 of you can investigate or 1 person rolls with advantage. That's pretty common. You both roll, and and I'm using the term fail, meaning whatever the DC was, you didn't roll high enough to succeed. I mean, literal fail doesn't mean you rolled a 1. It just means you didn't hit the number that you needed to hit to find the key. Yep. My instinct as a player is like, shoot, I know we walked into a brand new room. The first thing that happened is we failed. I have like a feeling as a player that like there is something here I need to do. Otherwise, why would this room exist? It doesn't always mean that. But in your head, you're like, well, what can I do? What is it that maybe because they failed the investigation, you can't do that? You can't just have them be like, well, now I want to perceive something.
Yeah.
But can you say, can you start asking specific questions to generate additional roles, such as they failed a general investigation? Okay, well, do I see any grooves in the walls that make a spot look like it doesn't belong? Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think like if you were in a damp cave somewhere, but
so
what can you do? Is there nothing? Should at that point you just move on knowing?
It's a little metagamey, mm-hmm. because you, the player, is thinking there's got to be something in this room.
Right.
And that doesn't translate to your character, who is like, I did my investigation. I didn't find anything. Let's move on.
Okay.
So I would probably say it's a better move to have that secondary objective that your characters can complete than to allow your characters to roll again for a more specific search.
So when I'm getting a little confused. When you say you have a backup plan, mm-hmm. you, the DM, need to have a backup plan in case if there is a key something or other that leads to something else. As a DM, you have to know, all right, well, if they fail this, I got to have an alternative method to get them to the end of whatever it is, even if it's not the same. And as a player, you have to swallow we failed. Like, even though 1 person rolled, it is a we as the party failed. Because that's kind of that line where you go, well, they failed the roll. I want a chance. Tough. That's the nature of the game. Mm-hmm. And instead of wasting more time there, just go ahead and move on.
Yeah, if everyone got the chance to roll a dice, the party would succeed every single time.
Yeah. No, and that's now if you walk into a room and the only way to go is forward and you fail at like whatever it is that you need to get to the door, can you keep trying?
Yeah, if there's a trap or something that keeps you from going forward, like a spring trap or a net trap, that there's always going to be a way to get out of that or around it if you are literally closed in on all sides.
But you may end up having to backtrack and go down a different hallway than you investigated the first time. You
should
might
always
go right.
The punishment shouldn't always just be you don't find what you're looking for. It should be you're going to have to take a little bit longer to find something else.
Okay.
And there's always going to be something else. Always.
Okay. That's good to know, because I think that's my instinct too as a player is whoever rolled on our behalf or whatever it is failed, and now you're like, shit.
Yeah,
I know. Like
it's
as a
frustrating
player,
to a player,
but I think it's an important thing to be reminded that everybody rolls poorly. Everybody rolls poorly. It's like, it's not like some sort of reflection of your ability as a player. Like, you you rolled poorly. It's fine.
Yeah.
It happens. The point of a dice game is that you're not going to be rolling 20s all the time. That's why it's so exciting when you do.
And to be perfectly honest, that's me as a DM, right? So I like to use dice rolls as there's really two opposite ends of the spectrum for using the dice. You can use them for every single thing. You can use them for almost nothing except for like combat.
Psh, I like rolling dice.
And then you have like the mixed bag where it's like, some things that are obvious. Why would you roll for that when you can literally just walk into a room and see it in front? I'm not going to make you roll a perception check so you can see a table and some chairs. And that's kind of where I lie, is if something is meant to be hidden, it's going to be a roll. If something is meant to not be found or seen or just out in the open, I'm going to make you roll for it.
Sure. If it requires a certain skill to recognize
Exactly.
it or... Now, I will also say this. I'm spoiled because as a DM, you're someone who really dives in and gives detail. We don't just like walk into a cave and you're like, all right, now what? We'll walk into, the mine and he will normally describe for us the majority of the stuff that you can see just generally looking. Like if you are just walking up and you've got no special skills of any kind, he'll go ahead and tell, he'll describe the layout. He'll tell us how big the room usually is or how big whatever it is that we can see. Again, any of those immediately obvious things we usually get, and then we can take our rolls from there. Which kind of gives us an idea of the kind of questions we should be asking for. So as a player, I deeply appreciate, despite the fact that we have maps and blah, 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 that kind of give us information, I appreciate that going into the theater of the mind and really giving me the information, because sometimes you don't know what questions to ask until you get a feel for what you're even looking at, right?
It is the DM's responsibility to give them the ammo that your players need to ask the right questions.
Sure.
You walk into a cave and it's not, just a bear den where you walk in and it's just four walls, and it's you walk in, the ground is there's like soft dirt, there's a trail heading off to the right. It's not lit. There's a trail heading out to the left that is lit. There's stalactites and stalagmites in certain locations. As a player, some might know that those could be monsters in waiting. You got to realize that your characters may not, unless they've come into it, unless they've encountered them before. In which case, if your character has encountered, what do they call it? They're not droppers. I don't remember what they're called. But there are creatures that look like stalactites that will drop on you. And so if your characters had come into contact with them before and you say there's stalactites, they're going to go, oh, God.
Oh, no.
So it is important for the DM, and I would say it's the DM's responsibility to not force the characters to ask for something that isn't there. Does that make sense?
So the idea is it's the DM's responsibility to give them the basic information so they're not just shooting questions in the dark?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
which I deeply appreciate.
Yeah, you give them what they literally see. Give them the details that make sense. If you're in a dark cave, you're going to give less details, because even if you have dark vision, you still only see in shades of black and gray.
Yeah.
You're not going to see colors or anything like that. And you still have limited vision out to a certain point. And, if you don't have dark vision, you're kind of fucked. So, but when you're out in the daylight and in a forest, trees kind of mold together after a while, so it can be a little disorienting. And it is the responsibility of the DM to know what makes sense for the players to see. I'm not going to tell you about a bird nest.
You're not?
Unless it's like, unless I'm saying it's a nice day and the birds are chirping, you look to your left and there's a robin in a nest, and that's not.
I don't think I've heard you do that before.
But that's because it's not important. Unless you're trying to paint a picture in a certain setting where it's like you've just come out victorious and you emerge from the cave and you've been in the Underdark for several months and you emerge and the first thing you hear is a bird singing. Yeah, then I'll tell you about the bird nest.
I will say another thing that we had kind of talked about bringing up on this particular topic, as we've talked a little bit about what your player knows versus what your character knows and that kind of line of metagaming, another part of that is if someone asks a question, the answer the DM gives, even though I do think the whole group needs to pay attention, of course, the answer is for the player who rolled. The answer is for the person who asked. I mean, if it's a conversation happening and everyone can overhear it, like your character's having a conversation with a character encounter and everything like that, then that is what's going to be open and obvious to everyone, you know? But if your character asks about something in history, perception, nature check, the answer is for that person. So unless that person shares the information with the rest of the party, they technically don't know it. The character doesn't know it. So if, for example, I have a background in a certain forest and I ask the question, what else do I hear? And he tells me, you hear literally nothing because that's a sign that a predator has been nearby and your history here would let you know that. Mm-hmm. That's not technically something everyone else noticed. Your character noticed it on your roll. And so you might tell everyone like, hey guys, it's eerily quiet. That usually means a predator is lurking about. It can be as simple, if you walk up and you're trying to translate something and, that character knows the language, therefore they're able to translate it. The DM tells you what it is. Everyone else still doesn't know it until that person tells them. Now you can do something as simple as go, I tell them what the DM said, which is why you need to pay attention.
And that works.
Yeah, that's fine.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's not as, RPing, and it's not as immersive, but that's fine, especially if it's a long description.
What he said.
Something that I really want to get into, and I'll probably start doing for our next major campaign, is providing props for your characters. Some things like parchment and scripts and little runes or tiles. So not only if you find it, I can physically give it to you. You can look it over, and everyone else can't see it unless you choose
to share
it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to kind of extra reinforce that. And I think a good part of that too is you got to be careful what you tell everyone, because how you say it is how they take it. For example, if you go off to have a private conversation and you're going to relay it to the party, and you go and the person's like, oh yeah, we might have seen that guy a couple days ago, but I don't think we did, I don't know anything else. If I do, I'll let you know. And you go back to your party and go, they didn't see anything. That's not quite the same thing as they might have seen them a few days ago.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's not a great example.
It comes up a lot in insight checks. So when, the one person is thinks they're being lied to, and they roll the insight check, and there is really no pass or fail on an insight check. That's, you think this and it seems genuine, or they are flat out lying to you and you can tell in their face. That's, it's a lot of gray area.
Sure.
But for that person to explain it to the rest of the party,
that's a hard line, because you're would you, be talking to someone and go, I think you're lying to me loudly to the rest of it. That doesn't make any sense.
Right. So you may go back and
your character would do.
He does have a point. You can RP it however you want to. And that makes it a little bit more fun because your table will interpret it differently than you do. Something that Matt Mercer does that I really like, and I'll probably start doing as well, is if a player makes an insight check and succeeds, he will actually go up to that player and whisper in their ear something that they notice or understand.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I do like that. He's apparently a pretty good DM, I guess.
Yeah, I guess he's okay.
But no, I do think that's a big part of it as well. How you translate it out to the party, that line between what you know and what your actual character knows, because that's where metagaming comes in. But it's also what makes the role-playing part of it so important, because you have to think about, if you're in a conversation, and we talked about this before, you don't, you wouldn't just openly tell, as you're going to be like, hey, he's lying, I can tell, to the party. That's information the DM gave you that you know, and it needs to affect how you then interact with the character. Even if it surprises your party the characters, what you might say next. That the point is that you got information that's valuable, and then what you do with it is part of how your character works.
That's something I love to do with my warlock is I'll get information and I'll withhold it from the party. Because, when you're playing online, everyone hears everything.
Right.
And they get this little like, wait, this guy just lied to me. And I, the player, know, and I'm pissed. But my character doesn't know, so I kind of just got to roll with it.
Yeah.
And it's fun mostly for the person who's lying because they get a little jab out of everyone. And sometimes what I'll do is like, nah, he's lying. And everyone's like, what is he? I'm just totally kidding. He's telling the truth. It's fine. And you can roll back on that. But I do think that if you really want to lean into your character, there may be times where, especially if there's information that could be detrimental to the party and you don't want them to know just yet.
Withhold.
You can withhold that information.
I rarely do that. That's a good point. I mean, we just recently in our Tomb of Annihilation campaign, we ran into a hag. My character wasn't one of the people who. So to set the scene, we're on top of this like plateau. My character is the bold, cocky, your classic man-whore cleric, right? Classic. And he goes right up to the hag and initiates conversation. And in his head, he's like, "I'm just gonna try to heal her, just like." She's blind. Yeah, she's blind. And Lesser Restoration technically says that it deals with blindness. So without even asking her permission, non-consensual healing, he's just going to reach out and heal her blindness. And behind me, the party was, the characters within it, my party, was 10, 15, 20 feet away because they didn't want to get that close to her. And two of the people way far back rolled and recognized based on their, what kind of roll was it? Arcanic or history? Something my dude was not proficient in. They recognized her specifically as a hag and specifically as a certain type of hag. Green?
Green hag.
Anyway, that is regularly a hostile type of character. Mm-hmm. But regardless of the fact that as a player, I'm like, one, I just heard that. Two, this is not a smart thing for my character to do. And the fact that it was probably going to be dangerous, my character would do it. Like that's exactly the kind of decision he would make. He had no idea that they were checking on things. They did not yell like, "Hey, I wouldn't don't get close, back up." Like there was no communication there. Not that it necessarily would have made sense for them to say anything. They could have, but they didn't. And so partially because people are so used to, well, you overheard the DM say it, therefore, nope, that's not how it works. I went ahead and went with it anyway. It didn't work. We're now facing a huge battle. It's fine.
Yep. So, I like withholding information, and I think that it comes to, once again, asking the right questions because it makes sense for your character to know what that is, and maybe not everyone else. I see you, buddy. I know. Hi.
Puppy's at we have a window right here, and he's at the window. Borkin. Bork? Well, more whimper. Yeah.
But I think that might be our timer for the day because we were planning on having a shorter 30-minute one today. And honestly, I think we kind of covered all the bases.
Yeah, and I think it's a good topic to just kind of keep in mind whether you've done it a lot or whether you're new. It's always good to get a reminder of these kind of things because one, your new people might not feel comfortable because they don't know what questions to ask, and it's an instinct to not want to look stupid or feel stupid. Help them, ask questions, give them ideas for as a character. You can be like, "Hey, don't you have a good set of eyes?" Like whatever it is to kind of help nudge them along. But also a good reminder that. Know what the rules are and know what people are doing because that affects, if you think that because I overheard Tyler say about the hag that I would react to it, I wouldn't because that's not my character's way. So good reminder if you wanted to say anything, which I don't think they would have anyway.
Exactly.
Anyway.
So thanks for tuning in. Just want to remind everyone, we are changing our schedule to Sunday afternoons. Mm-hmm. Probably around this time. We'll usually send out like an invite either the day before or maybe the morning of.
Yeah, we'll do like calendar events
and
stuff.
But don't forget that it's, you can always watch it on the Facebook site. We're uploading everything to YouTube. We're eventually putting everything on the website. So you can watch them all there as well. And then
if you have any ideas for topics, do let us know because we're just kind of going through some different stuff, but we're always happy to jump into something that you want to see.
Yep. That's it. Awesome.
Have a good one.
See you
Bye.
later.